A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
On a Wednesday, we like to get all the breaking news out of Israel and the Middle East with Mandy Worby. Mandy, welcome.
Hey Andrew, it's nice to be here. Yeah, I thought I would start just by looking at yet another deal that is being presented. There's been so many, hasn't there? At the moment, yes, another deal is being pushed by the United States on both Israel and Hamas. But the problem is that this new deal, it's not really new at all. From what I've read, it's basically a deal that Hamas put forward not too long ago that was just ridiculous and was rejected outright. But President Biden submitted this particular deal and said that this is what Israel has presented. Apparently, Israel didn't know anything about this deal, and it's basically to put a lot of pressure on Israel. From what I can gather, and there's conflicting reports at the moment, Hamas is rejecting it, which is kind of strange because it was their deal in the first place. I think what it does, it seems to be proving the point that Hamas is simply not interested in any kind of real peace deal with Israel. So at this stage, it's up in the air. Let's just put it that. We'll leave it at that way. And since Israel entered Rafah, and they now have control of Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor. The Philadelphia corridor is basically nothing more than a thin strip of land that runs along the Egyptian border wall with Gaza. And the nations of the world have been absolutely going apoplectic because Israel has taken Gaza, condemning Israel in it. And in particular, Egypt and the United States. And I think I mentioned last time that approximately 50 smuggling tunnels have been discovered between Gaza and Egypt. And since then, many of the weapons found in Gaza by the IDF in schools, in children's bedrooms, medical clinics, and all the UNRWA facilities appear to have come into Gaza via Egypt, which is very concerning considering Egypt has a peace treaty with Israel. And Egypt doesn't like Hamas either. Remember the recent Rafah massacre that Israel got blamed for, but was actually innocent of? That conclusion came partially from the fact that some US weapons were found at the site, assuming that Israel had lobbed them in there. However, it is believed, unconfirmed, but believed that the American-made weapons were actually brought in from Egypt that were American weapons given to Egypt. So they've gone into Egypt, they've come from Egypt into Gaza and were stored on site where the 45 Gazans were killed. And that's almost always the case, isn't it? Because Hamas is always using civilian places for terror activities.
Yeah, that's the thing about terrorists. They don't need to abide by any international rules or laws of war, do they? Have you got an update for us on the IDF?
The security chief of the General Staff in northern Israel, Herzi Halevi, said that right now the Israelis are approaching the point where a decision is going to have to be made about dealing once and for all with Hezbollah, and the IDF is prepared and ready to move to an offensive posture. That was as of yesterday, so I got that report coming in overnight. And Mr. Levy, he conducted a tour. He made a situational assessment with the Israel Fire and Rescue Services Commissioner, Ayel Caspi, at the Gibor camp. This is on the northern border. And they did that in participation with the commanding officer of the 91st Division, Shai Clapper, and a whole host of other leaders, making decisions on how they were going to proceed, because every day since last October, Hezbollah has been lobbing rockets into northern Israel. And right now, as the temperature is increasing, and I mean the physical land temperature is increasing, the ground is drying out, they're coming up to the hottest part of the year. The greatest immediate threat is bushfires, something we in Australia understand all too well. And dozens of communities are being bombarded with rockets daily. And they're having to deal now with raging bushfires. These are impacting communities in the Galilee, the Golan Heights, right up around the border with Kiryat Shmona, Metula, all these different communities. And as you know, bushfires are deadly, not just to homes, not just to people, but to wildlife and the land. Over the past 4 to 5 years, terrorists inside Israel and from Gaza have used bushfires as a means of terrorism. It's becoming an annual problem. For the past number of years, Hezbollah has used inflatable devices and balloons and things like that have had explosive devices on them. They've sent them over the border into the grain fields and the properties in Israel and started bushfires. That's what's been happening every year. You don't hear about it on the news because, it seems like the usual response is if it's happening to Israel, it doesn't matter. The only time the world gets upset is if Israel responds, it seems. That's the way it seems. You tell me if that's what you think.
100%. It does seem like Israel is judged with a different set of rules.
But at the moment, Hezbollah are using terrorist suicide drones, okay? And using swarms of these suicide drones is causing massive damage because of the explosives in them. So when the rockets are aimed at dozens of towns, the fires are erupting simultaneously over widespread areas. And the firefighters are having to, spread themselves pretty thin to deal with it. Our Aussie firefighters, just so you know, have been assisting Israel with the strategy, training and even volunteering to help their Israeli counterparts. They've actually been in Israel over this last month. Some might actually still be there. Our Aussie firefighters are some of the best in the world, and I'm so proud that some of our guys are actually over there helping Israel. Israel is not at war with Lebanon. They don't want to be. But after 8 months of daily rocket fire, Israel is at the point where her patience is just about gone. And we're going to have to wait and see what action Israel decides to take if she actually does make a move. But she's going to have to do something because Israel can't put up with Hezbollah's unceasing acts of war and war crimes for much longer. Also, it has been confirmed, this is very sad news, 4 more elderly hostages, all men, have been found dead inside Gaza in another terror tunnel. Elderly gentlemen, and they have been dead for a few months now, murdered by Hamas. There is concern that many people believe that at least a third of the hostages is still in Gaza may already be dead.
Yeah, that is so sad for the families, but really, I wasn't very optimistic about any of those hostages from day one.
But on a happy note to finish with, I want to share with you that today is Yom Yerushalayim. That is Jerusalem Day. And it is the most recent addition in the Hebrew calendar of celebrations for the nation of Israel and Jews around the world. And basically it commemorates the reunification of Jerusalem under Jewish sovereignty, which took place in 1967. That was during the Six-Day War. Okay, it's celebrated every year on the 28th day of Iyar, 6 weeks after the Passover Seder evening, and a week before the eve of Shavuot. And Shavuot is the Feast of Weeks, which is the Feast of Pentecost. So we're close to the Feast of Pentecost. Jerusalem became the capital city of the Jewish people in the time of King David, who conquered it and made it the seat of his monarchy in approximately 1000 BC. Now, it was conquered twice in antiquity. The second time was by the Romans. The first, of course, was the Babylonians. But the Romans sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. The destruction of Jerusalem was it was a massive watershed event in Jewish history that began thousands of years of mourning for Jerusalem. Jews around the world in the diaspora absolutely desperately longing for Jerusalem. In fact, whenever a Jewish couple are married, doesn't matter where they are in the world, and even in Israel today, they always celebrate as they smash a glass. The husband, the groom, he smashes a glass under his foot. And that is to remember the destruction of Jerusalem at the end of Passover every year, whether the Israelites are celebrating it in the land or out of the land. It finishes with next year in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is so important to the heart and the life of the Jewish people. So the destruction of Jerusalem, this massive watershed event in Jewish history, it began thousands of years of mourning for their holy city. And it became an official day of mourning every year on Tisha B'Av. And during the 2 millennia exile, Jerusalem remained the Jewish capital, the spiritual capital especially as well. And to this day, as I said, Jews face the direction of Jerusalem for prayer, and Jewish services are filled, like I said, with references to Jerusalem.
I actually didn't know most of that. That's really interesting.
However, there has never been a special day in honour of the city itself until very recent times. Now, I mentioned that it was in the Six-Day War that Jerusalem was reunited, because following the War of Independence in 1948, the city of Jerusalem was divided. The older eastern side fell under Jordanian control, which was illegal internationally, and the more recently developed western side was under Israeli control. And on the third day of the Six-Day War, in June of 1967, the Israeli army captured that ancient eastern part of the city. And in 1967, that victory marked the first time in thousands of years that all of Jerusalem came under Jewish control. It's also allowed the Jews access to the holiest parts of the city, especially the Western Wall, a remnant of the ancient Temple Mount structure. It is a young holiday as far as Israel is concerned and Israelis, so there haven't been a lot of customs or traditions built up around it, but it's gradually becoming a bit of a pilgrimage, and thousands of Israelis travel, many of them hike, up to Jerusalem and celebrate solidarity within that city. And it's showing a great deal of love and passion where they want to protect it and keep it. There will be celebrations today, although they will probably be subdued, but they will most definitely be celebrating Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day.
Yeah, amazing to think, Mandy, that King David is the one that captured Jerusalem for the nation of Israel thousands of years ago. And as you said, it's a celebration day, but there's a dark undercurrent in what's going on in Israel right now. Mandy Worby, we want to thank you so much for joining us on 2020 Today.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.